Assalamu alaikum. It's me, Layla Abdullah-Poulos. I'm ready to review my next book written by a native-born American Muslim woman writer. And I decided to go a little light this time because the previous book I read, The Broken Half, dealt with some really dark subject matter. And so I decided to lighten it up a little bit. So the book that I chose is Elle Muslimah, The Real Muslim Housewives of Philly. So if you look at the cover, it looks like something really fun and entertaining. There's a lot of bright colors. And also I looked at the word real, like the use of Real Housewives, and it reminded me of the Real Housewives television series. And the book kind of reads like the television series. It follows four friends who live in Philadelphia, and it goes between the four friends' lives and all of the different things that happen to them and the dramas that they have to go through. It is about relationships and different types of relationships, marital relationships, and sisterhood, and how Muslims in one African American community interact with each other. The majority of the characters are African American. There are a couple of Arab characters. One of the four friends is an Arab American. And so it's really interesting how the friends interact with each other, how the women interact with other women in the book, and how they interact with men in the book. There are a few cultural references. When I read a book, I look for three things. I look for Muslim cultural references, American cultural references, and gender cultural references. That's what I look for the purposes of my research and my study. This book is packed with Muslim cultural references, American Muslim cultural references, and African American Muslim cultural references. So one of the things that the author uses, and this is something that I've seen that's pretty common with the native-born American Muslim women's text, is the inclusion of Arabic. The Islam was originated in Arab culture, the religion. So the Quran is revealed in Arabic. The Prophet Muhammad SAW was an Arab, and so the usage of the language carries across cultures, across Muslim culture. So as one culture, people of one culture start to embrace Islam, they start to utilize the Arabic language. They start to utilize it formally for worship, acts of worship, reading the Quran, praying, and also informally. So the book does use a lot of informal Arabic phrases, common Arabic phrases in American Muslim communities. So greetings, assalamu alaikum, wa alaikum assalam. Also like kayfa hal and ana bi khair, things, alhamdulillah, subhanallah, things like that. So it does have those. Some of the men wear thobes, which is also apparently indicative of a Muslim culture, especially Arab thobes. They seem to wear a lot. And that is something that is common in American Muslim communities and African American Muslim communities. The men tend to wear thobes. They may wear them exclusively, they may wear them occasionally, but it is included a lot of times in the male wardrobe. A lot of the characters wear niqab in this particular setting, Muslim community setting. A lot of the women wear niqab, some don't. Niqab is a face veil. Then also there's the role of the masjid in the book, and so the masjid plays a significant role in many American Muslim communities, the mosque, because it not only serves as a center of worship, but also community activity. A lot of community activity happens in the masjid, so the author does give reference to that. So there are classes, there are communal events that take place in the masjid. This is where some of the characters go looking for spouses and and getting married, and funerals as well. So there's a lot of community activities surrounded in American Muslim communities in the mosque, and so the author also refers to that. The author also addresses polygamy, which I'll get to in a couple of minutes, but not right now. There are a lot of American cultural references. Two in particular that I liked was the author used the famous Fannie Lou Hamer phrase, sick and tired of being sick and tired, which really refers to African American experience. And she also utilizes something a phrase that I grew up with, One of the characters' husband was eating, and he really enjoyed the food, and so he said, "You put your foot in this," and so that's a common compliment that in African American communities that people who prepare food receive. It means the food is really, really good. So there are also African American cultural references. There's also gender references. The author does address women's health, mental health, birth control, and custody. One of the characters has to deal with trying to have joint custody of her children with her ex-spouse. There's also reference to prison, Muslim men in prison. One of the characters' husband is in prison, and so how they interact, how that relationship is in the book. And Muslim men in prison are not something that's completely alien in African American Muslim communities. You have a disproportionate amount of African American men, period, that are in prison. So those include Muslim men. There are a lot of conversions to Islam. A lot of Muslim men and women, but especially men, convert to Islam. And I'll attach a link to a really good video about that. And so that's another thing that's another thing that the author deals with. The author also deals with polygamy, which is where I think she really touched the nerve. She deals with a couple of different polygamous relationships where the spouses are thinking about it. One is a second wife, third wife, second or third wife. I can't remember. I forgot. Her husband is in multiple marriages, and he switches wives. And I think that showing some of the challenges of polygamy, this is what the author addresses in the book. I think that kind of touched the nerve. One reader said, "This is not the way relationships are in Islam, in Muslim communities, not the way it is in my Muslim community." Well, the author wasn't addressing that particular person's Muslim community. And so that's one of the issues that ethnic authors tend to face. And that is this assumption or expectation that they're speaking for the entire culture. So every book that they write speaks about and to the entire culture, because there is a potential for someone outside the culture to read and generalize some of the material. And you can't really put that on the author. The author is writing about experiences in her community and polygamy in her community. One issue I did have as far as the way the author addressed polygamy is that at the end she didn't have one really functional polygamous relationship until the end. And then there was one, and it wasn't really fleshed out. It just was indicated that there was this one polygamous relationship in the end that worked out. And it would have been nice to kind of see a one functional polygamous relationship contrasted against the other ones that weren't so functional. There was a lot of drama around polygamy, but there's a lot of drama around everything. Like I said, she even deals with adultery and statutory rape. So there's a lot of heavy issues, but she still manages to keep it entertaining and exciting and not get too bogged down and heavy with it. So she is criticized for the way that she addresses polygamy. She's also been criticized for her grammar and her style, which is interesting because this is not something that is uncommon with ethnic authors, especially African American authors. When an ethnic author decides to write in a way that speaks to their culture, someone outside their culture may have problems in relating to it. There's a disconnect there because the person is accustomed to reading from their cultural perspective. Now here's a new cultural perspective. Sometimes it comes off as poor writing. First of all, you have in this book you have the merging of two languages. So you have the merging of Arabic and English. And that's not always an easy thing to do. And so even though as I read it, it technically is something that is sometimes grammatically incorrect. But when you're a part of that culture, you understand how those two languages work together. And trying to get those two languages to work together because they're two very different languages. Like, for example, Arabic, like Spanish, doesn't have a neuter. So when you're kind of putting it with English that has a neuter, it becomes a little problematic. So some of that may be coming into play, and also it's just really the author speaking to his or her culture, and the reader needs to understand that and appreciate that. And this has happened with other African American authors. I have some examples. Toni Morrison was criticized. Toni Morrison was criticized because of the graphic nature of her novel, and it really kind of disturbed some sensibilities of people outside of the culture that that are not accustomed to these types of things happening. So I know, for instance, in her book The Bluest Eye, she deals with racism and the dehumanization of blacks, and it's very, very disturbing the way she deals with it. Beloved was extremely disturbing. To this day, I never was able to finish it, but it's something she's speaking to her culture, and that needs to be respected. James Baldwin, another venerated African American author, was criticized for the simplicity of his language. Was criticized. Readers felt it was too simple, and the characters were hard to follow because of that. And again, he wasn't necessarily thinking about any people beyond his target audience, and that's really what an author is supposed to do, is think about their target audience. Chinua Achebe, he was criticized as well. Things Fall Apart, a great book, but it became there was a cultural disconnect among many of the readers outside of that culture that saw it as something barbaric, and so they were very disturbed by that as well. So it does happen, and I think a little bit is happening to Muslimah in regards to this book. You have an author who's writing to their cultural target and people outside the culture, even Muslims, because Muslims are a diverse group in America. So even Muslims may have problems with having a cultural disconnect, especially if they're coming from outside the African American Muslim culture, or even regionally. I mean, the issue of polygamy in Philadelphia is something that's significant to the culture. I mean, NPR did a report on it. So it's not something that is not dealt with in Muslim communities, and especially this Muslim community. So there may be a little bit of disconnect there, especially if you're you're belonging to a Muslim community where there's not a lot of polygamy, and then you're looking at this book which deals with polygamy, and it deals with a lot of issues in polygamy, and thinking, well, that doesn't really happen in an American Muslim culture or an American Muslim community, when in fact it does. Okay, so this is something that happens, and I strongly suggest any African American author, any woman author, any African American Muslim author, any Muslim author to read this book, Reconstructing Womanhood: The Emergence of the Afro-American Woman Novelist, because African American women novelists are derided more than any other any other genre. Their works are derided, and so this is a book about them claiming the validity of their work and the way that they convey their artistry to the rest of the culture. And so she's also criticized for her grammar, but there's a lot of literature out there, a lot of classical literature out there, classical authors that had bad grammar. Jane Austen, she had bad grammar. Okay, Shakespeare, bad grammar. He ended sentences with prepositions. Jane Austen had used double negatives a lot. Okay, William Faulkner is criticized for the grammar in his work. But these are authors that are part of literary canons. You know, Mark Twain used bad grammar all the time because he was speaking to that culture. And so in order to speak to that culture, he utilized bad grammar. And yet his work is still in the American literary canon. Authors don't get it perfect. This is the reason why you have copy editors. So it's always good to have a copy editor. But also, besides that, if the author is speaking to a particular culture, the language is going to reflect that. And that needs to be appreciated. And so when you're going into it, you kind of need to appreciate that that's happening. And I think that a lot of that is what's happening here. So a lot of people did love her book, and I actually liked her book. I think she did a really good job. The characters are very colorful. There are some really exciting things that happen, and you have to do that because she switches between characters. And so there'll be one scene with something going on with one of the main characters, one of the four women, and then she'll switch to another one, and then she'll switch back to that one. That's not an easy thing to do. You have to keep the reader interested, but you also have to keep the reader interested enough in each character so that the reader will remember what's going on. And so I think she did that really well. It's a really fun read, and I find it a little exciting because this is the first one that I read that actually kind of looks like Chicklit. And I'm not going to get into Chicklit. Okay, I'll put a link for a book in Chicklit, but literary theorists know what I'm talking about when I talk about Chicklit. So this is an example, I think, of native-born Muslim American Chicklit. And I can't wait to talk to Dr. Erin Young at Empire State College about it. That's really exciting. So it's a really good book. It's a really fun read. You have to look at it as something that the author is writing about her cultural experience, and you have to look at it that way and try not to generalize. So again, Elle Muslimah, the real Muslim housewives of Philly. And so check it out. My next book is Khadijah's Got Her Groove by F.A. Ibrahim. So as soon as I get a minute and some quiet time, then I'll do the book review for that one. And thank you for watching. And if you want to know more about my work on Native-born American Muslim women writers and Native-born American Muslims, please visit my website. I'll put a link in the description section so that you can visit it and you can check out some of the things that are going on. It is growing. I'm getting access to more and more Native-born American Muslim women writers and American Muslim writers, which is really, really exciting. So I'm getting, they're starting to contact me, and I hope they keep on contacting me. And so if you know any, please suggest one to me, especially if you know any Latina American Muslim women writers. You don't have to write fiction. You can write anything. It could be nonfiction. It could be a blog that you're doing. It's fine. Please contact me. Visit my website. And see you at the next book review, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.